Good evening. I'm calling to order and calling the Castle Hills CCPD Board of Directors meeting to order. And a quorum is present. Present is Mr. Tovar, Mr. Hurst, Mr. Booth, Mr. Evans, and by Zoom, Mr. Ingram. And I am Jim Jones, and I am present also. I'd like to open this part with citizens to be heard on a non-agenda items. Is there anybody that'd like to speak before the board? I don't know if anybody signed up, but okay. Seeing no one, I'm closing that. Discussion and possible actions on minutes of the September 9th meeting, September 9th, 2020 meeting. Has everybody had the opportunity to look over the minutes? And does anyone have any questions or I know I do, but does anybody have any corrections that they can see? Mr. Tovar, any questions about the meeting from September 9th in the minutes?
I'm going to stop you there for just one moment because we do have some breaking news.
I'm sorry, say it again. Mr. Tovar, could you get closer to your microphone because we're having a hard time hearing you, sir? Go ahead. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Say it one more time, Mr. Tovar. I
I
apologize.
says, the only thing I was asking about is about the transfer of funds to another budget. In other words, to get that particular thing done and have this other where it was transferred, wait for those funds for later.
Is that in the
you hear
September
that?
9th? Is that in the September 9th minutes?
I think we did, it's because you mentioned it something also about like $3,000 or something like that.
Oh, that was from our August 19th, sir. And I don't know if we've done that yet. This is just from the,
You all had another meeting before?
no. We discussed the 3,000, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at the very first meeting that we had when we all gathered
Was
together.
that resolved?
So I don't know if we approved those minutes yet or not either. They're not available, so. Oh, that part, yes. We approved the budget, which included the $3,000. Any other questions, Mr. Tovar?
Good for me.
Mr. Hurst? Mr. Booth?
No questions.
Mr. Evans? Mr. Ingram?
No.
Okay. The only thing that I saw is under section 6, the very first discussion and possible actions of the unassigned funds. It says Siemens noted he received quotas, 25,000 for the purchase of body cameras, supporting software for devices and server. I went over the minutes or the video last night, and I think what he was referring to was just the $25,000 for the server, because if you include all those other items like body cameras and et cetera, 25,000 is, that's not it. So I'm going to suggest is that we just delete from the words for the purchase of body cameras, supporting software for devices and just say, I guess he received quotes $25,000 for a server, if we can. Okay. And then the next correction I saw was a typo, is in number 9, comments from board members. Under contract information on board members, I believe it should be contact information. That's what Mr. Booth was referring to, and that's all I saw on those. And okay, I was just going to ask, to make sure it was okay with you guys. Mr. Hurst moves that the minutes be accepted as corrected. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Evans seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Ingram, you are the Let me just say, I have an oral presentation and some questions that I'm going to pose rather to Chief Zuniga and Mr. Rapoli regarding the CCPD expenditures. And because I'm the one that's going to be making the presentation, I'm going to hand the chair over to Mr. Ingram. He is the President Pro Tem.
All right. Okay, so do you want to proceed with your presentation?
If I may.
Please do so.
Thank you. Fellow board members, I appreciate this opportunity to address you tonight to speak about the concerns I've had about the CCPD fund. And first of all, I have no agenda. I have no agenda except the Crime Control and Prevention District. Although some of my communications with the then Chief Siemens and the city manager were concerning to me, I have absolutely no desire, none, to denigrate anyone's reputation or position. And let me state loud and clear that this is, that my concerns are about the fund and not about the police department as a whole. We have an outstanding police department, and this is not about the troops on the street. It's only about the fund and certain aspects of the fund. Let me also say that the Castle Hills Crime Control and Prevention District is a gift. The citizens of Castle Hills were thinking about their future when they voted to have a CCPD. Having a crime control and prevention district is the envy of so many police departments, not just in the area of San Antonio, but in the state of Texas. Not even San Antonio has a crime control and prevention district. I believe the citizens realize that their safety and the department and individuals that provide that safety come at a price. And they want a portion of their taxes and revenues going only to their police department. The administration and oversight of those funds, I believe, is the function of this board. I'm speaking for myself that I believe we have a fiduciary responsibility not only to the Crime Control and Prevention District, but to the citizens of Castle Hills as well. If Mrs. Smith were to come down to the podium and say, Mr. Jones, I've seen the budget for the CCPD, but what can you tell me about the actual and individual expenditures? My only response would be, ma'am, you're going to have to talk to Chief Zuniga because I have absolutely no idea. I personally believe, just me, that my responsibility to the CCPD and to the citizens should be to know about these expenditures. Now, back on August 19th, when we had our first get-together, and that was our first meeting, and that was the first time that we met each other and we gathered as a board, I was speaking with Chief Siemens out in the hallway. And I explained to him that I wanted to see like 2 years of bank statements just to see how the board was being utilized and how the funds were being dispersed. His immediate response was, well, that's like guilty before being proven innocent. That statement dumbfounded me. And in that same conversation, Chief Siemens told me, then what would be the use of spending $15,000 on audits? Now, to be honest, I expected Chief Siemens to say, Jim, give Ms. Davis a call. Give Ms. Davis a call and set up a time to come over and review all the documents we have. We'll sit you down. If you have any questions, I'll be right down the hallway. But that didn't happen. I can only tell you that the pushback and resistance to give me that information was disappointing and concerning. I won't bore the board or anybody else. I sent copies of the emails of my requests and my interactions with Chief Siemens and with Mr. Rapoli to the board, and I won't bore you or anyone else with the details. I'd originally asked for the bank statements to cover only 2 years so as not to burden the staff. But I came to realize that after seeing the bank statements, it just wasn't enough to determine how the checks were, what they were being written for and what the expenditures were for. So I sent an email to the city manager and the Chief Siemens with 27 questions regarding a number of checks and the expenditures. On the 27th of November, Chief Siemens emailed me stating, quote, all expenditures were approved by CCPD as is done annually with budget approval and audited as is done annually by external auditors in addition to our finance staff. Now, I responded saying that sometimes auditors aren't aware of particular limitations of expenditures placed on CCPDs, either by statute or the board itself. Eventually, on December 16th, I received an email from Mr. Rapley saying, hey, the information's available. The ones that you've been looking for backup regarding the expenditures, it's at the police department. 30 minutes later, I emailed him back saying I'm on the way. I came to the PD, I picked up the packet, and inside the packet were 8 pieces of paper pertaining to 7 checks. There were about 90 checks for 2018 and 2019. And after making a number of requests in writing and verbally for the invoices, receipts, work orders, et cetera, of the checks for 2018 and 2019, as well as the bank statements and documents for 2020 up to that time, I received information on only 7 checks. To say I was disappointed would be an understatement. And again, replied asking for all invoices, work orders, receipts, et cetera, for all checks and expenditures made during 2018, 19, and the current year up to date. But I also expressed a strong concern about the record keeping, that if what was presented to me was all the documentation used to support an expenditure or document the reason a check was written. Mr. Rapley emailed me and said he was going to have Chief Siemens call me so we could set up a meeting with myself, Chief Siemens, and Ms. Davis, and he did, and we did have a meeting. It was on December 30th, and present at that meeting was Chief Zuniga, Chief Siemens, Ms. Davis, and myself. We discussed a number of items, but including one of them was check number 1561 for $600 to IPC, the bank, for research of documents for a criminal investigation. I presented Chief Siemens with a copy of the budget for 2018 and asked him which line item that he took the $600 from. He looked at the budget and said, admin support. I advised him there's only $500 in that line item. So both Ms. Davis and the chief went on to tell me that exceeding budgeted line items is done all the time, and that Chief Siemens told me that he's contacted other cities. And it seems to be an accepted practice. It appears that what seems to be normal financial practice is to be able to juggle funds from one line item to another. I guess it's felt that as long as the bottom line of the budget doesn't change, they're not going outside the budget. I disagree. According to Chapter 363 of the Local Government Code, when it comes to limitations on expenditures and investments, A, money may be spent only for an expense included in the annual budget or an amendment to the budget or to it. Chief Siemens said he had no problem writing that check, which exceeded the budget line item, and he would, quote, do it every time. I just don't believe it is a good practice to exceed the budgeted line items or juggle funds from one line item to another without prior board approval, and then hope later on that the board will go along and amend the budget at the end of the year. And as far as amending the budget, that same local government code chapter states the budget may be amended after the beginning of the fiscal year and on approval by the board and the governing body. It's really that easy. If you need to expand that line item, come to the board, propose it, we bless it, it goes to city council, they approve it, and you get the money. It's really that easy. I believe it is the board that sets the parameter for each line item. And if expenses exceed that line item, it is the board that makes the adjustments, not the administrator. It is the board that makes any and all amendments to the budget, and that includes budgeted line items. So another email at the beginning of this year talking about audits and district records. Section 363.202. Board shall have an annual audit made of the financial condition of the district by an independent auditor, which we do. B, the annual audit and other district records shall be open to inspection during regular business hours at the principal office of the district. It says the annual audit. So these aren't auditors looking for more records or whatever. The audit's already done. So the annual audit and other district records shall be open to inspection. I interpret that to include disbursement records, and that could include investments or anything else that has to do with the district. It appears these records may not have been available for inspection for some time or ever. Now, on January 27th, I received copies of the documents I requested, but minus the 2020 bank statements. Prior to that date, Chief Zuniga was kind enough to send me a list of the budget payouts for 2018, 2019, and 2020, which was very much appreciated, Chief. However, I'm still waiting for the 2020 bank statements. My most recent reminder was emailed to Chief Zuniga, the city manager, and Mrs. Davis on February 2nd of this year. I received no response. So based on the documents that I've received, I have a number of questions for Chief Zuniga and the city manager. I believe you'll be able to understand by my questions that my only concern is transparency and accountability. Now, I've said privately and in writing, and I'll say it publicly, that I do not like gotchas, and I don't like ambushes, especially from the dais. And Chief Zuniga, did I not sit down with you and Lieutenant Wagner and go over these questions with the two of you last week? And although Mr. Rapley did not attend that meeting, did you send him a copy or discuss the questions I'm going to ask? All right, thank you. Just in case that anyone couldn't hear or whatever, the answers to both those questions were yes. In reference to check number 1504 for $48,965.30, it was made out to the general fund. On the check request form dated 6/7 of 2018, the reason for the check states, quote, to clear out due/to funds and pooled cash owed to general fund. See attached balance sheet. The next page is a balance sheet with notations to a due to other funds, an amount of $33,376.35. There's an arrow drawn from that line with that amount to a handwritten notation stating this has been on the books for as far back as 2014. First of all, what did the CCPD owe the general fund amounting to $48,965.30? And why the discrepancy between that amount and the balance sheet amount of $33,376.35?
So the answer to that question, I have to defer to finance. Nora has a response.
Good evening. Basically, what's happened on the references to that balance sheet is balances that have been carried over through the years starting in 2009 that CCPD funds from the general fund had been used for CCPD and they were owed back. They were owed to the general fund. In 2009, we did not have assist. It started in 2010. So what we have here, and I can make copies for each of y'all, it's the balances that were carried from year to year. They were not paid back accordingly, so it accumulated throughout the years. On some of these, there are adjusting entries that were directed to us by the auditors. So when they did the audit, they went in there and checked the expenditures. They've noticed that there was monies that CCPD owed the general fund. And they were entered here accordingly, but the transaction of funds was not done.
Okay, so there were balances carried over. Is there any documentation to show what were the expenditures? What were the
Well,
expenses?
like on one here, it's Victor O. Schreiner and Company, that's our bond company. So that was for the bonds. Now on others, it has audit journal entry number 12 to consolidate interfund balances. So we would have to actually go to the audit, the actual, audit itself, look it up and see what journal entry number 12 is, so we could get the explanation for it.
Okay.
Again, they're all pretty much self-explanatory on here. Now, for backing, the way you're asking as far as what was it, we'd have to do the research. I mean, pull the audits out for every year and look them up.
Well, my only concern is that, this check was written, and with the information that you gave me, almost a $49,000 check was written, and there's nothing to show why. In other words, what was bought, what was purchased, what the expenses were they credit card expenses, et cetera. There's no documentation.
Right. So, like I said, on here, it has, like, due to Fund 1, CDW government, so that was an invoice. I mean, it's on here. I can make copies of this for you also.
Is that the information that you gave me? Or
Not
that the city
this.
gave me?
No. When
This is something-
when I did the expenditures for you,
Mhm.
I was given the directive to do the front page of everything. So that's what I did. And then that's what you have, is those 2 pages. This is all what was behind more supporting documentation to what I gave you the first time around.
And does that cover all the information that you gave me? You only gave me the first couple of pages instead of supporting documentation?
On all of them, on most of them, that's all we have. It's a 1 page or width of the invoice. This, I gave you what was the front page and the second page, and on a contract that we have with Robert Koschel.
Okay.
For Robert, this is his the 2 files for 2 years that I did not make copies of all of this. I gave you the front page, which was the breakdown. Again, that was a directive I was given to give you the front page of what showed the expenditure. This is all the documentation that goes with that on that particular person.
So so for these months that I've been requesting invoices, records, receipts and everything, you were told, don't give me that information, just give me whatever the
I was
first
told
couple
to give
pages is?
you, to make copies of the front page with the check, what I gave you.
Uh-huh. That's what you were
Yeah.
told
I was the directive I was given.
by Mr. Rapley? Yes?
Now, as far, to give all these, it's a lot of pages, but again,
Mm-hmm.
The idea was to give copies of checks and backup and invoices, and some of those were as is. That was it. Ms. Davis was up here for 7 hours on Saturday making copies and scanning of everything, okay? Mr. Koschel, his IT support is divided among departments, Ccpd, administration, and other areas. Those 2 files have all the backup there to what got paid Mr. Koschel. Mr. Koschel was doing IT before I got here for the city. But again, from the standpoint of what was behind the copies of the checks or invoices, that's what she made copies of.
But why wasn't I advised that we have files of invoices and receipts and everything else? And Jim, if you want to come over and look at it, they're right here. I've been asking for months, and I get, by your order, I get the front 2 pages. However, I've been asking for that information, and this is the first time that I've heard that we even have invoices. No one's even told me through my communications with you and with Chief Zuniga that there are even files like that even exist.
Again, from an account payable standpoint, we use work orders and invoices, and that's the backup to checks that were in there.
That's from an account payable, sir, but when I happen to ask for the background, in other words, I want to see those files, I want to see the invoices, and I specifically request invoices, receipts, work orders, et cetera, and then you order her not to give them to me.
From a staff time that spending to do that. Again, I was of the understanding it was just copies of invoices related to a check. So again, that's what I thought was just in those files in particular. But again, it's talking about staff time to come up here and do this and pull all those records.
Well, first of all, I even volunteered to come over and help her, but I didn't get a response. And second, no one even asked me, hey, it's going to be so time consuming, Jim, can you just come over here and, you can spend 8 hours all day. We'll put you in an office and you can look through your heart's, to your heart's content. I mean, no one even told me that these files, I've been asking for these documents for months, Mr. Rapley. And this is the first time that I'm hearing on the night that I'm making this presentation. This is the first time that anyone's told me, hey, Jim, there really are files and there really are documents.
My understanding it was just a backup to Rob Koshel here that was pretty extensive. That's why Ms. Davis has them here right now for review, and she can make copies at some point for you
Well,
with that one particular question under Rob Koshel.
All right. But
Well, can I just interject? So maybe if those copies can be made for your review, and then after you've had a chance to review them, then can we maybe, come back to it at a later meeting?
well, sure. I mean, I have no problem even just sitting down. I'm retired. All I have is time. So, I mean, I have no problem coming over and spending 10 hours a day or whatever it takes just to look at the files. But it's really disheartening when all I've been doing is asking for these documents. And today is the first time that I've been advised. Today is the first time that I even know that these documents exist. No one ever told me. I would have made arrangements like, hey, oh, they do exist? Hey, let me save you some time. Let me just
Again, I
come over
thought
and
this
look
was
at
the
them.
extent of the request for this, okay? And that's what I thought it was. And so again, I have to say from a time, and Ms. Davis pulling these records, was pulling invoices or work payables related to that one check. I didn't know some were more extensive than others.
So with the 1504, Mrs. Davis, for the $48,965 check, you're saying that you'd have to go back and look and see what was actually purchased by CCPD over the years?
Right.
Okay.
Or refer back to the audit and see what that journal entry is, the directive that the auditors gave us to make the change.
So the auditor brought this to your attention, that there's this almost $49,000 check
So
and we don't know
they
what
did
it's
it on
for?
a year after, it's on every year where they would, like this is 2010. So they have audit journal entry number 12 to consolidate. So we'd go back to the audit and look up what that is in reference to. So we have these for every year, which I'm more than glad to go over them with you.
It's just a lot of money, and I'm going to ask Mr. Booth and Mr. Hurst if when that check was written back in 2018, that came out of the 2018 budget. Because from what I understand is, for instance, if there's $500 in admin for 2018, and the next year they still have 500, but the previous 500 wasn't used in the previous year, it doesn't roll over into the next year. So that $48,000 check came out of the 2018 budget. And I'll ask Mr. Booth, was anybody notify the board about this check?
No.
Mr. Hurst? Do you remember anyone coming to the board and saying, we wrote this check for almost $49,000?
I don't remember, but my feeling is that if the funds are there and it's documented that we approved the budget and the funds are there and it's documented, then it's above board. I don't feel like every time they need an extra $100, extra $1,000 or whatever, if the funds are there and it's been approved, it's okay.
How about a $49,000?
That doesn't matter. If the funds are there, and like she has said, it's documented where it's coming from, and auditors approved everything, then we're okay.
Okay.
Or I'm okay. That's my personal opinion.
I understand, sir.
Well, we've got $500,000 in our account. I would hate to think that just because we have the funds there, we just keep writing checks. I
No,
mean,
no,
everything needs to be documented
no,
per
that's not-
check. And honestly, I don't know why we're getting any money from the general fund. I mean, we should stand alone as our own business and everything come out of our checking account, including credit card bills and things, and that we can easily see that everything's matched up and the budget items, line items are kept to what we approved. And if they're not, then they need to be brought back to the board and asked for an addendum to add the additional funds if it's needed.
The
Well,
most,
A proposal, I think that the additional documentation needs to be shared with the committee members and the members be given time to review it. And then I think we should table this item until we've had a chance to review this additional
Well,
document.
sir, Mr. Pro Tem, I'm just making a presentation and just looking at checks. We're not, there's no motion, there's nothing to table as far as I know. I'm just making a presentation and bringing up a check and we're just having a discussion. But the issue that I was going to suggest is that essentially that budget for 2018 was amended by $48,965. And no one has that authority to amend the budget except the board. So that's what I was going to say is that these funds don't roll over into the next budget. So almost $49,000 was taken out of the 2018 budget, and this board was not notified. And it's the board that needs to amend that budget, and essentially that was amended without the board's approval. Let me continue if I may, Mr. Pro Tem.
Sure.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis, I guess I'm just going to make a comment more than anything else. You don't need to respond. But the signature looks to be Chief Siemens and I think then Mayor Howell. And I'm not sure. I think it's their signatures. But I guess I'm concerned is that I don't think they had the information that you're probably going to go back and look throughout the years to sign this almost $49,000 check. So we had two signatories sign a check because the general fund says you owe us, without being able to be shown any kind of documentation as to why do we owe you. I guess that's the issue. And like I said, I'm only doing this or presenting this for accountability and transparency. Okay, but I'm just saying, I find it hard to believe that if you didn't have it by now to present to me, then they probably didn't have it a couple of years ago when they signed the check. Go ahead.
no, they had it. This information that was attached was at the point when these totals came up. The backup information was with that, so they were aware.
They were aware of the
what
balances,
Right.
but not the actual expenditures,
Well,
because then they'd have to go back years to find out what that
oh,
was, right?
Yeah, but as far as,
Okay.
you know,
So like I said, someone's from the general fund saying, hey, these balances add up to almost $49,000 and you owe us. And no one questioned as, well, why do we owe you? These are just balances and there's no documentation. I guess that's my only point, and you don't have to answer. I'm just saying.
right, well, I guess some of these are directives from the auditors.
Right.
Again, I think if the board wishes at a future meeting, we could have our former auditor attend to question how expenditures were audited. They tested, sampled. It's been the same auditor in place for the city the last 7 years. They tested and sampled the general fund as well as CCPD over the last 7 years. We have a finance officer who's part-time, Ms. Fegans, who's sort of our expert in this area. She couldn't attend tonight. This is not my area of expertise. I'm not an accountant.
I know.
And so she could easily explain these better than I could, Ms. Davis and or Chief Zuniga in this matter. She was involved with our auditors on how the directive came to put these in the audit and how the budget was provided and approved by City Council at the time. The CCPD budget is included in the budget as a whole. I know there's an indication in the CCPD and the statute that says it would have a separate audit. Well, I mean, since I've been here, I don't really get involved in the operations of the CCPD from that standpoint. It's been handled by the police chiefs. Now, the auditors review this budget as part of it, and they always have. Now, if the board makes a different decision, then that would be a board decision and a cost to the CCPD to have that audit. But again, it's been custom for as long as I understand in talking to former police chiefs and staff that it's always been incorporated into the city budget. But again, you know, having Ms. Fegans here at some point, I'm looking for a permanent finance director, but she's been helpful over the last 3 years to really change some things in our finance office, work with our auditors, and to get things in line that previously was not probably in line in previous accounting procedures. I know that this is a smaller city. I worked for other cities that have different mechanisms in place, policies in place. I can tell you from a line item standpoint about controlling line item between myself, Ms. Fegans, and Councilman Gregory are here. We put a budget policy in place that says in a line item, you can only transfer so much. If not, we take it as a budget amendment. And then at the end of the year, we do a budget amendment as a whole through the city council for the entire budget, which includes CCPD. And that's the process we've been using in place, at least as long as I've been here. I can't speak for previous police chiefs, city managers, and finance officers of this city. But again, you know, I spoke to our former auditor last week, and, you know, everything she feels and has reviewed in the last 7 years is feels like qualified expenses. They've tested, they sampled, they looked at large expenditures with the CCPD. And again, you know, you might want to hear from the resident expert in this case and have our former auditors back, or at some point, Ms. Fegans, who couldn't be here tonight, attend to explain these. Again, staff here is here to help. And we're not here to be obstructive. We're here to help.
I understand, sir.
And there's many things that the board could do. And we're here to help, you know?
I appreciate that, Mr. Rapley.
We're not obstructive.
Yes, sir. So when that almost $49,000 check was written out of the 2018 budget, who told the CCPD about that expenditure? Because it certainly it didn't come out of a line item.
I'm not sure, sir. I'd have to go back and talk to the auditors about that specifically.
Well, I don't think.
But that was the directive from our auditor to our finance officer, Ms. Fegans, at the time.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, sir, that budget came out of the CCPD fund.
Well, again, sir, what I would say as a board, you could decide policy and procedures as a current board. So in case of expenditures like this that come in question, they would come back to the board for approval. But right now, nothing was in place for that at the time. But this board can put policy and procedures in place and certainly implement new mechanisms as a board.
Well, it sort of already is in place, Mr. Rapley. We have a statute that states that money can only be spent from the line item in the budget or an amendment. And somebody wrote a check way outside any line item that I saw and didn't even notify the board, and didn't even give the board a chance to say, you know something, you're right. We owe this money. Let's amend the budget and add almost $49,000 to the budget and get it taken care of. But no one said a word. I've got two board members here from that time. And the board wasn't even, it was like, we don't got to tell them. $49,000? I'm sorry, sir. I mean, this is the CCPD, and that's a huge check. And that was a huge amendment to the budget that wasn't made. That's my only position, sir.
Well, again, I think we can get further detail and explanation of what, how, and why it happened during that time.
All right, sir.
But why it did go in front of the CCP board, I'm not sure.
All right, sir. Who, Chief or Mr. Rapley, who are the signatories on the CCPD checks?
So right now, it was previously me and Chief Siemens, and now we need to go and make the change. It's just me standing alone right now. But we need a second signature.
Okay, so I know I've seen Mrs. Davis's signature on signatures on some of them. So it requires two signatures. So who all can sign a check?
Are you included in that?
That was when Chief Davis was here, and he added, we had 3, and it was 2 of the 3. That was a temporary time. Then the following year, it was switched over to Chief Zuniga, well, Chief Siemens and Zuniga.
Juzuda.
CCPD is the only account that has 2 signatures.
Okay, okay. You know, getting to those files involving Robert Koschel, what you gave me, which is all I have to go on. But there's an entity called Castle Hills. The other entities are city admin, PD, court, fire department, public works. Now, it appears that not only did we pay Mr. Koschel for what he did for the PD, but we paid 40% of what was charged to this entity called Castle Hills. Can you tell me what that entity is or who that is, please?
Okay, for Castle Hills is maintenance that he would do day in and day out overall for the city. It had to do with server, window update. It's all here, and it was routine stuff. He did overall, again, for everybody as a whole.
Okay,
Then,
go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
forgive me.
so he has a number of hours that he dedicated to that. And then by department, if any of the departments called on him specifically for issues, then he would note the number of hours that each of those departments took, and then and gave us a total to charge for it. So the Castle Hill total is what's actually divided up by percentage through the departments. And then we would add, or I would add, what that department had added on, I mean, the extra work, I mean, specific work for that department.
Okay, so I know the police department and fire department and court, all these other departments pay their own way. But this other Castle Hills, we pay 40% just from the CCPD.
Right, and admin pays 30% out of that Castle Hills, court pays 20, fire pays 5, and public work paid 5. So it was all divided up.
No, if you add up, I believe if you add up the hours to include the 18, I'm just talking about what check number am I at, 1497. I think if you add up all those hours, that's 77. If you add up all those totals, that's going to be 1925. And so
Which check number? I'm sorry.
1497, and that's just the
1497.
first one that I'm just bringing as an example. So for the PD,
So 1497 is 1,067 with 50 cents. So that constitutes, you have your front page? Okay, it's $180, which is 40% of the 450. And then you go to PD, they had 887.50 cents worth of work done just for that department.
correct.
So that totaled up 1,067.50.
But explain to me again, who is Castle Hills? Because the other departments are represented. We got the city administration, PD, court, fire department, and public works.
Castle Hills is like the server. You can't divide the server up. The server serves all the departments. So maintenance to the server, maintenance to programs that serve all the departments.
Okay. Okay.
I believe it's just the way it's categorized. But the IT support for Rob Koschel was shared among the departments, like we do Barcom now as their IT support and maintenance. It's a shared cost among the departments.
Just for servers only.
Well, servers, maintenance, IT support to staff. We have issues with our desktops. We call them to come in, troubleshoot. That's what Rob was here presently doing.
Right,
But then again, Rob was here before I got here. And then when Rob left, it was decided to use Barcom sort of on demand. And there was some cost savings to doing that than actually having someone here.
Okay, so we get charged for whatever he does for the police department, evidently. That's what this document says. And
Yeah,
then we
and I-
pay 40% of the charge that he charges to Castle Hills, and that's the shared servers, but that doesn't include staff, that doesn't include laptops used by city admin or city hall or anything, that's just servers, right? Because,
That's just overall maintenance on, back then, I mean, he's not around anymore.
right,
Back then, he'd maintain what would serve, what the whole city uses, I mean, everybody uses.
okay.
And again, I don't know where that breakout or shared division of cost came from. That was before I got here, but
He's referring to the part where it was just Castle Hills, not the broken out.
Gotcha.
part.
Okay,
Like backups. If a backup is, we have to have a backup every so often. And that's constitutes everybody. That's not only one department. So he was responsible for all of that.
okay.
So,
It's primarily just servers and everything that everybody uses, not just a separate entity
Right.
that we pay 40% of their costs. Is that correct?
right, 40%, right.
Yes, as far as the CCPD okay. I was going to ask the same question about Barcom. Chief, on your budget payouts, let me thank you again for taking the time to send me those budget payouts for 18, 19, and 20. Chief, I really appreciate that. There's an expense for $1,000. This is out of the 2018 budget payouts for $1,000 to True Caliber for .223 ammunition. This was done with a credit card. However, there's no check to a credit card company for that expense. Can you explain?
So it's quite possible that that one, we coded on our end as it shows on the spreadsheet that I provided you, but that could have been also included in this lump sum payout, that 48 or whatever, that check that you keep referring to from the beginning.
Okay. All right. How come we don't have our own credit card or debit card?
Typically, we have a debit card that serves the city. We're not, as a municipality, the bank has instructed us that we are allowed to have only one as a governing entity. So that's what we've always, and we followed them.
So even though we get like $250,000 a year and put it in their bank and we're a separate fund per se, they don't want to give us an
But
extra card?
you fall on.
I know we fall in the city.
Yeah, so it's,
I get that, but has anybody asked IBC, or I think that's who we go with, right? Say, hey,
so we've even asked to get a second one, and they said they're not allowed, that we're allowed one. And for record keeping, and as far as, and I know Mr. Booth mentioned right now, a credit card, it's a debit card. We don't
Right.
have a credit card. So,
that's cool.
and I don't want to digress and go to what we were discussing a while ago, but when CCPD, for whatever reason, they need something and they use that debit card's tied into the general fund. So when we reconcile bank statements, those amounts have to be pulled out of the general fund, and CCPD is going to owe the general fund on those debit transactions.
And the city has been with IBC for 10 or 15 years, and one of my projects here soon is to go out for a new banking depository at some point.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I just think it would be easier, and I might be wrong. I mean, Lord knows like Mr. Rapley said, I mean, we're not accountants, and I get that. But you'd think that it would be easier, especially for the chief. He needs to make a purchase.
Well, as our Councilman Gregory, as our treasurer, we would like to see some interest drawn as well, and they're not drawing interest, so it's time to maybe shop around.
Well, I would support that, but I just think as far as paperwork and accountability and everything else, if we had our own credit card that we can say, hey, this is the bank statement for this credit card or this debit card, forgive me, for this debit card, I think it'd be a lot easier as far as accountability to say yes. And as a matter of fact, on this date, I got the receipt and the invoice for this one. I think it'd just be easier for the CCPD to but that's okay. Well, I look forward, Mr. Rapley, to hopefully we can get that situated, and maybe it'd be more convenient for everybody that, you know, you might not have to worry about what we owe the general fund, and there's, you know, funds going back and forth, et cetera.
Well, it's a project for when I do, hopefully here soon. I'm going through applications and finding a permanent finance director, and that's one of the first things they do is put an RFP together for a banking depository.
I appreciate that, sir. Chief, I know I spoke to you about it last week, the FedEx check number 1580 for $320. Did you find out what that was for? Because all I got was the invoice, Chief, and I didn't get anything else. It's just $320.20 for FedEx, but there's no invoice. I mean, there's an invoice saying that was how much we owe, but there's no documentation.
I went back and I tried to locate that. I have not had luck in finding specifically what that charge was for. I believe that it was not in the spreadsheet. Is that correct? That I sent you? It was just showing in the bank statements, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. What year was that again?
2019. It was written on July 9th. The check was, I'll put it that way.
And what, did I,
Oh, check number 1580? Sorry, if that's what you're
what did
asking.
I attach, did I?
Oh. Ma'am, all you gave me was the invoice from FedEx. That's all I got. It says total this invoice.
Can I borrow that?
Oh, sure. But, okay, we don't need to find out right now, okay? No, but go ahead and look at that, and, because I'd like to move on, but I just, this is just another reason why I think we should have documentation and, you know, available.
So I'll have to dig that one out.
Okay? Yeah, if you can find out sometime, I'd appreciate it. I don't mean to be repetitive, but getting back to that, that charge back to for $600 for the for criminal investigations. He was put under admin support. I don't believe this was what admin support is supposed to be used for. I don't believe admin support should be used for criminal investigations. I don't have any problem with us assisting with those expenditures. But I just don't think admin support. And if you go back and look and see, like in the general fund budget, when they talk about contractual expenditures, et cetera, and they're talking about admin stuff, they're talking about administrative things and not investigative tools. So if investigative tools and expenses such as Leads Online and Texas Workforce are needed, maybe we should have a separate line item for that. And I just think that having specific line items alleviates the issue of, well, you know, how can I articulate this so I can fit it into this line item? I have no problem with extending our budget, you know, lengthwise as far as line items. But I think we could probably be a little more specific. And Chief, I'm going to ask you just to do me a favor. I don't know who all on this board is familiar with Leads Online and Texas Workforce database, but would you explain to us why those two are important for law enforcement and for police work?
Yes, sir. Leads Online, Texas Workforce Commission. There's LexisNexis. Those are all utilized by our detectives for investigatory purposes. It's also utilized by the warrant officer looking for researching warrants, trying to locate where somebody maybe employed, their history, and trying to facilitate in locating the subjects so that we can try to collect on warrants. As far as the detectives, again, they use it for investigatory purposes to, you know, try to solve some cases.
If I'm not mistaken, Leads Online can also be used to track stolen property, see if they've hit pawn shops and things of that nature?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is just a suggestion, and I'm hoping that maybe if I'm still around for the next budget, that maybe we can just think about being a little more specific, you know, with our line items, that if we need to put in a line item for investigative tools, and put in enough money to cover leads online and those items and Texas workforce, and even a little buffer, you know, for criminal investigations to, you know, for an expense just as this. I think it'd be a little easier than trying to figure out, gee, how can I fit this into admin support when it's a criminal investigation.
And that's correct.
expense.
Like in reference to that previous one where we'd spoken about the $600, that was also for investigation. The bank billed us for their research and going back and pulling requested documentation from that bank.
And I know it's just $100, but you know, and I don't mean to belabor this, be honest with you. You know, I just got a funny feeling that if it's $100 now, hey, $500 next time, don't worry about it. I got a problem with moving funds around. That's all. We're trying to cover expenses, Chief. That's all. I'm not accusing you. I'm just saying.
No, I understand,
Okay.
and I apologize. I mean, I was under the impression that, and it's, that if we exceeded something, then there would be a budget amendment, you know, and I was under the impression that the general counsel would make that budget amendment and approve it and so forth. So,
General counsel means city council?
yes, the city council.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying by statute, the board amends the budget and then it goes to the governing body for approval. So.
What I would suggest again, as we, you know, introduced the budget policy during my time here, again, with the assistance of our treasurer, Councilman Gregory, there could be done a similar budget policy with CCPD board. The mechanism could be in place as a board's decision. What I would like to highlight and let you know is during my time here, one of the things we did for transparency is try to introduce on your budget here a 5-year historical. So you can actually see the numbers, see how the balances come from each year. And then the line items have been changed here and there to form fit expenses, especially in the general fund during my time here and our finance officer as well. We have done those things that are more tailored towards the particular expense. And if the board has decided as a CCP board would like to see those things, then it's certainly something we can introduce, discuss with our finance office, and I'm sure our auditors would be on board as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vapley. I'm almost done. Hang in there. This is probably going to be the same along the same lines as that check from 2018 with the almost $49,000, but check number 1603. It was written March 1st of 2020, written to the city of Castle Hills for $15,928.26. Now on the only thing I have, and I apologize that this is all I was given in spite of what I requested. All I have thousands of dollars of debit card expenses. But I don't have any documentation to show what these credit card expenses were for. And there's an expense to Mr. Mark Blackmer for $4,257. Now, we've issued checks before for Mr. Blackmer, but I don't know why it's on the general fund side. So was this a general fund expenditure? Or was this, and you might not have that information, Ms. Davis. I'm just saying that for the information that I was given, man, I don't have anything to show where these thousands of dollars are. And also, what kind of curious, because I know that everything that supposedly that all expenditures from the CCPD comes across your desk so you can put it in the budget payouts. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Well, something else that concerns me is that this $4,257 check or expenditure out of the general, it's not on your budget payout. So I guess I'm just kind of curious on how did the CCPD get stuck with $4,257 expenditure when it didn't come across his desk or Chief Seaman's desk at the time? And there's no documentation showing that we owed him or anything else with these credit card. And again, I apologize to everyone. I've got limited information evidently, but that's all I've got. And so I guess if you don't mind checking into that to see that, especially the $4,257 that didn't come across the chief's desk, but we got billed for it. And Chief, let me just say publicly, Chief, probably shouldn't do this from the dais, but I wish you all the luck as far as being appointed the chief of our department.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I mean, I can tell you, and I know we have a pro tem taking care of the chair right now, but my interactions with you, sir, have been extremely professional, and you've been outstanding. So I really do, doesn't mean anything, but I wish you the very best, sir.
I appreciate
And
it.
like I said, every interaction I've had with you, sir, has been outstanding. It really has. And
So-
that goes, I noticed we have a couple of officers in the back. That goes for the street officers as well. And not that I'm running rampant across, the streets and, racing on highways at 2:00 in the morning, but every single interaction I've had with the Castle Hills police officer has been perfect. Perfect. And let me just I'm going to take a little liberty here. When I came to visit with you last week, it was Corporal Fawcett was doing some training with one of your brand new officers, Officer Morales, I believe it is.
Yes, sir.
And I was sitting outside and I was eavesdropping. Now I spent 35 years with SAPD, and 10 of those were with internal affairs, so I know about complaints and everything else. And let me tell you something, and this is for everybody to know, that I was eavesdropping, and the way that Corporal Fawcett was instructing that young officer was absolutely fantastic. And I'm sitting there going, man, I wish that, just the way, the words that he used, what he was told to use, how to present himself was outstanding. And I'm sitting there going, man, I wish that my FTO might have gotten me out of some complaints when I was a lot younger, but I wish my FTO. So let me just commend the department that whatever I'm doing here has got nothing to do with the troops. And I'm glad you guys are here, but every interaction has been outstanding. And I'll stop. I got one more.
So just as an FYI to the board, in my experience, I've been involved in hiring police chiefs in other cities. And so I have a process that I'm putting in place for selection of interviewing of candidates. And my goal is to bring forward a nomination to city council in April.
Well, I just like Chief Zuniga, especially my interactions with him. So I just wanted to wish him luck.
Well, just in case you're curious. you
Okay,
know,
I appreciate it, Mr. Rappin.
We have to keep it transparent and open it up
I know.
and have a
I know.
selection process with the board I've already
course.
selected to interview.
Of course, sir. Of course. Last one. Well, last checks. I got just a couple more questions. And I kind of discussed this with you, Chief, and you know what? I'm not even going to bring up this. Let me just say that again, that I think we need to be a little more specific with our line items. That's all. And I think it would be easier for you to say, hey, man, I want to buy this gym equipment for the guys, which I think is a great idea. But we're trying to figure out, well, how can we fit that into any kind of line item? And so I would have just hoped that with that expenditure, you say, you know something? I mean, I think it's a great idea. You know, not only are we keeping our officers healthy, but it decreases the city expenditures for healthcare, et cetera. But just come before the board and say, hey, I want to spend this money. It's for the troops. And I don't know anybody up here that would go, no. I'd be disappointed. So I'm just asking, sir, that in the future, and if you get selected to be chief, that I want you to feel comfortable and say, you know something, I want to come to the board and I want to ask either for an amendment to the board or to the budget or add another line item. That's all.
And just real quick, I mean, like we spoke before, the line items on this budget in comparison to the general budget are a little slimmer. You know, we don't have as many line items. So again, we'd welcome expanding those.
Sure.
Breaking them down even further.
Okay. Just a couple more things. On your 2020 budget payouts, Chief, there are two expenses, applicant testing and applicant polygraph. That's only $335, and I get that. But how were they paid? Because there's no checks written that I know of, and there's no credit notation, no credit card notation. Can you just kind of tell me how they're paid?
So some of these, like it was explained last week, and I'll recap on that. Some of the training that we do, it's through ACOG. They've changed their protocol on how they accept a payment because I believe Lieutenant Wagner had mentioned that some students or officers were reserving for a class, but they never show up. So it locked in a spot and they lose out because they never collected funds. So now they require that we pay up front for anybody that we're going to send to attend for a class. And the only way to do that is with a credit card or the debit card, city debit card. And then in turn, we submit that invoice for payment where we'll reimburse.
But is there a credit card notation next to that, next to those two items? Because usually it'll read like CC or something on the budget payout. So is that, was that just done differently and it was a credit card payout?
I'd have to look it up. I don't.
That's okay.
So
That's
the
okay.
second one, the one for the ACOG, that one was paid with a credit.
Oh, yeah, right, okay, right.
But you're
Okay.
referring to the 872, right?
No, that was
No.
for the gym equipment.
Oh,
That's the
that's
previous.
Yeah,
different. Okay.
no, that's,
I apologize.
that's
Okay.
different.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
debit card.
Again, one of the things helpful having an auditor is sometimes, again, we try to code everything as possible related to the line item. And sometimes when we do have an audit, they may say that's not coded appropriately and go back and make sure that it's done correctly. And that's part of why I have the audit test sample and have that oversight portion.
Very good, sir. Very good. Now, I don't like griping about anything unless I've got a solution. Now, I've got some ideas, but I have hogged the mic all night. So, Mr. Pro Tem, if you would like to open it up for discussion, and then we can kind of go from there. And like I said, I'm sure others have something to say or some solutions, and then I can interject at the end.
So does anyone have any comments that they would like to make?
Well, I would. Thank you, Jim, for researching all this and looking into these expenses. I agree. We need to know that we have backup data for all the checks and debit cards that are written. And what I was curious about that I saw in one of the expenses was for the cameras that are outside. Did the fund for the court pay for any of that, or did the crime Ccpd pay for all of it, or did the city pay for part of it? I mean, I know it's a significant amount, and I was just curious if the other departments were able to assist in that.
I believe that courts supplemented that as well because of court security and so forth.
Okay, yeah, because it certainly shouldn't come out all out of our fund. Because I believe the court does have a fund specifically for security.
That's correct. I mean, they're the ones that have also supplemented the dais with the ballistic panels and so forth. So.
Okay.
Any further comments?
I know you're tired of hearing my voice, but I do have some ideas. I know we already talked about getting a separate credit card, and if that could be, I think if we could talk to the new financial director or finance person, if that would help, and I get we have to, I mean, in the future, if that would help with separating expenditures from general fund and CCPD, I think it probably should be looked at.
And it probably could, from a clarification, again, the debit option has been what's in place. My previous cities I worked for, I had a credit card. So that is something we're going to explore, especially going through a new banking depository.
And I apologize, I meant debit card, forgive me, but I already expressed my concern about the line items, about being more specific. I think we should require, work orders, invoices, et cetera, with every expenditure. And I'm not even, boy, I know how paperwork, okay, it is a drag. But I don't know if because I'll give you an example of one of those receipts that I got that were only for 7 checks. One of them was just a receipt for Home Depot, and it said handwritten was AC PD upstairs. But I didn't get any other documentation except for a receipt. So what I'm proposing is maybe, and I don't know, we need to do a motion because we can do our own according to the statute, we can prescribe accounting and control procedures for the district. So maybe we need a separate form. And boy, I know you're going, you got to be kidding me, but maybe just another form. On it would have the check number or the credit card number, not the actual credit card number, but the expense number. There's a code there or whatever, or anything to show that this was an expense, who it was to, what it was for, if it was done in-house, what was the reason, if it was AC and Mr. Harada or some of his troops, took care of it. What was bought. Sorry? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because I'll be honest with you, a receipt from Home Depot and just says Ccpd upstairs, that doesn't, I just think we probably should get some better details. That's all. And so, I mean, we can address that over the next couple of months or whatever, and we can and bring it up next time. But or we can develop a template, and some of us could work on it ourselves. But I just think that maybe just having another piece of paper just to say that with every expenditure, you better have CCPD Form 1 with it, and that's just with every expenditure, whether it's credit card, check, whatever the case may be. And let me ask, now that this came to mind, is there any transfer of funds from one account to another other than a check? In other words, is there any kind of transfer from CCPD to the general fund? You know how you can just transfer funds, okay, it has to be a check or something like that. Okay, good. Okay.
Sir, what I would suggest, again, because we are a smaller city and that's been the sort of account payable process that's been in place for a very long time. I've worked in other cities where the accounts payable form was very extensive, sometimes even backed up by a memo by the department head on the expenditure itself. I don't know if we're necessarily into that detail, but again, it's the board's prerogative. But we certainly are open to any suggestions the board might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rapley. And like I said, it's just for accountability and transparency. And then when someone comes over and says, hey, I want to look at these expenditures, they don't just see a receipt, they see a form stating this is what was wrong with the air conditioner and this is what the repairs were. And if it wasn't done in-house, that this is who did it. And now we know who to go to for a warranty if it breaks down again in 10 days.
And if I may add, since we've also spoken about it, we've kind of changed our way on our side. We've purchased some scanners to start scanning invoices to make it a lot easier for Ms. Davis not having to go back and pull in invoices that have already been filed, so we can readily access any of those.
I appreciate that, sir. I appreciate that. And Mr. Pro Tem, that's and that might even cover, agenda number 2, but that's all I have. And so I don't know if we need to, I'm not going to make a motion, but I think these are just ideas for us to keep in the future. And that, if anybody comes up, I can come up with a template, or we can just, at the next meeting or between us to say, hey, what do you think? Any ideas? And then present it before the board, et cetera. That if you think that would be feasible and not add too much burden to you, Chief, or to the Lieutenant Wagner, or whoever would be, addressing that. But I just think just a little more detail and just so people know that the information's there. That's all.
I had one more request. While we're still on expenditures, could I get a copy of the invoices for all the vehicles we purchased in 2020?
Yes, sir, we can provide that to you.
Yeah, thanks. I don't need it today, of course, but it's whenever you get a chance.
Right. And just for the record, that we did purchase a total of, was it five unmarked and 5, 6, 7 marked units.
I don't believe we budgeted for all that, did we?
The marked units, well, they're 2 different line items. One is the patrol units and the other one is classified as CID admin vehicles.
Did we get all the back orders that we were after? Because I knew Ford had a problem and we substituted some other vehicles.
The marked units were taken out of the last year or the 2019 budget, and the unmarked units were taken out of 2020.
How many unmarked vehicles do we have?
5.
Thank you.
And Chief, we did go forward with those vehicles because of the delay on the marked vehicles. We had been waiting almost 2 years, I believe, correct?
That's correct. We wound up having to jump forward and had to purchase. That's why we have 2 Tahoes, because Ford was taking a little longer to make delivery on the Explorers. And we were down 2 Dodge Chargers already, so.
And that's what my understanding is. The fleet was depleting. And so in order to have those traffic units, that was what the reason was for doing those, because of the fleet depleting at the time.
And we lost all the trade-in on all those vehicles because of the delay.
Okay, so Jim, do you want to go ahead and create a template and maybe circulate it to the members of the CCPD in advance of our next meeting, and then we can approve it at our next meeting?
I will work on that.
All right,
Okay.
sounds good.
Anything else, Mr. Pro Tem?
No, I don't think so.
All right, sir. If you don't mind, I'm going to take the chair back.
Certainly.
I believe the next item is body cameras. Bear with me.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the next item is record keeping, item 5.
Oh, you know, I'll be honest, and that was by me. And I think those were addressed in the first agenda. So, I mean, I don't have anything else to bring up unless anybody else wants to, but I think we kind of covered that.
Well, I think your revenue and expenditure item was not for action, but I believe the record keeping is for discussion and action. So if the board wanted to make a decision on that, they could.
Okay. Well, let me ask any of the members of the board, do they want to make a motion regarding record keeping, or do you, or does anyone want to make a motion regarding record keeping? I know I don't, not at this point. Anybody? No one? Okay. Then I'm going to close this item out for the agenda. That there's no more discussion. I think everything was covered during the first agenda item. The second one is body cameras. I will tell the board, and I sent you guys a copy of that email, but back in November, I sent an email to Chief Siemens. I stated I had a contact up in Austin, and I was able to find out that the funds, these are state funds, would be opening up on December 14th. And I sent an email to him asking him if he thought that, and this was back in November is when I emailed him, November 17th. Asked him if he thought the city and the CHPD would be able to get whatever is needed to apply for those funds by then. And when he responded to me 4 days later, he said that there are currently no grants available that he could find. But he went on to give reasons, why we needed them now, and that we are ready, more than ready for the cameras, and I understand that. Now, Chief Zuniga, during my meeting with you and Lieutenant Wagner last week, we discussed the body camera issue, did we not? Okay. And like I said, I'm not going to ask you anything or do my best not to ask you something that I haven't talked to you about already. But there came a point in time when a command decision was made for our department not to apply for a grant. Can you explain that decision?
So what I understood is Lieutenant Wagner undertook that project and researched that particular grant that was proposed. It was to my understanding that grant would not be awarded available until October of this year. If we waited that long, then we would have to wait, and that's if it was awarded to us. We would still have to wait to order the product, the equipment, get it installed, and then get each officer properly trained in the use of the camera, which would very well carry us into 2022. In light of last week's events that happened in Balcones Heights, the unfortunate events, they were fortunate they did have access to body cams immediately, which facilitated the immediate capture of those 2 suspects. I really believe that that's something that we need now, and I would kind of agree with the chief or previous Chief Siemens that we needed. That's something that we he wanted to push forward more immediate than opt to wait for that grant to be awarded.
Since you took over, since there was no effort to look for any other funds, since you took over as interim chief, have you tried to find other solutions for funding since then?
We're both myself and the lieutenant are working on it. He's more like he explained to you last week. He kind of has a little bit more expertise in that line. He didn't say he was a professional. He just he was searching as much as he could on part of still trying to fulfill the other responsibilities.
I got you. I emailed you some information on January 22nd regarding a police department in Fate, Texas, at least letting you know that they had applied for a grant. And from what I understand, no one contacted Fate PD to ask about the process, to see how difficult it was or what it entailed, et cetera. And from what I gather, and correct me if I'm wrong, but no one contacted TML, and that's the Texas Municipal League. And they represent all cities, primarily smaller cities, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we belong to TML. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't think anyone called and asked them if they could help with developing a grant application.
No, sir. For sure, I believe that we didn't do that. We didn't contact TML. In reference to the Fate, the information from Fate PD or the city of Fate, I did review that. But I also noticed that it was back from 2017 when they submitted that grant. And I believe you made reference that they were awarded within a month of submission. We don't know the parameters of what or when was set in place for that particular grant.
Well, Fate went through WatchGuard, and I know that since we're going to stay with WatchGuard because we have their dash cams, did anyone contact WatchGuard? Because they even have a little video about grants on their website. Did anybody contact WatchGuard or the salesperson or your contact with WatchGuard regarding assistance with grants?
So Lieutenant Wagner has been in contact with WatchGuard. Apparently they are going through some transition now. They have been since bought out by Motorola. So he said that there's been some times where there's been some periods of silence where he's not been reached out to by the territorial salesman or whoever it is that's representing WatchGuard on our end. He was able to finally get a hold of somebody, but it was on Motorola side.
That's all you know?
Yes, sir.
I guess my concern is that, if the grantors, and I know that we've got a second estimate that's just a little bit higher than the one that we've been presented last time. Maybe about $3,000 or $4,000. That sound about right, Chief?
Yes, sir.
About that? But using the old numbers, if the grantors just asked us to match only 25%, if my math is right, we might be saving the citizens somewhere around $43,000 or more. And I guess so now we're in a kind of a precarious position because no one even tried to apply for a grant. Do we have policies and procedures in place regarding our officers' use of the body cameras?
No, sir. We're still pulling sample policies and looking at them, but we haven't built a policy for our department just yet.
Have you consulted City Council and the District Attorney's Office regarding the possible regulations and rules and regulations and policies?
No, sir. What we do is we
input?
generally build we pull sample policies and then we build it and then we can do the presentations and so forth.
I have a funny feeling that, all this is taking time. You got to do the rules and regulations and the policies and procedures. You got to have City Council input, DA's input, what they want to see as far as policies and procedures, make sure that you get the blessing, et cetera, I would imagine. and the training of the officers for the camera's use. And I got a funny feeling we wouldn't be able to utilize those cameras for some time. So how long do you think it would be until if we got the cameras tomorrow, how long and I haven't discussed this with you, Chief, and so I do not mean to put you on the spot, and I'm not ambushing you, I'm just asking your professional opinion. How long do you think it would be if we got the cameras tomorrow, that our officers would be out there on the street?
It would be the matter of time of again, getting them installed, getting them up and running, getting the officers trained, and before that, of course, obviously, getting that policy in place, so that's something else that we could dictate to the officers here. These are your parameters as far as how they're going to be used.
Okay.
I couldn't give you an exact time. It could be a month, 2 months, I don't know.
I got you. I guess I'm just disappointed that we didn't even try to get a grant, to be honest with you, Chief.
Yes, sir, I understand.
No.
that.
No,
Again,
because-
looking at it, it's just, what we understand is that it's the time of that particular grant.
Well, and evidently there's other avenues that we didn't address either through watch card or anything else. Someone made a command decision not to apply for a grant, and it kind of put this board in kind of a precarious position. That position I don't really like being in, because to me, and I'm not trying to be incendiary or anything, but to me it looks like someone just said, let the board pay for the entire tab. But the board's not going to pay for the entire tab. The citizens are going to pay for the entire tab. And that's the problem I have, and I have a problem with that mindset. I'm not saying you, Chief, I'm just saying someone down the line made that decision. So now we got to decide, are we going to wait and try to get some funding and save the citizens close to $45,000, or do we just spend the money? And I'll open the floor up for discussion.
Would like to make a comment. I feel like the use of body cams is becoming standard protocol in most law enforcement divisions. And I feel like, the city of Castle Hills has been researching this for a number of years. And I know that there were some concerns about the constitutionality of it. But I think that those issues have been put aside and have been resolved. And I do think that this needs to be made a priority, that our police department have access and are wearing the body cams. And so if funding is not going to be available, or if we can't begin applying for funding until October, I feel like that's an unnecessary delay, and we need to consider allocating the funds from the CCPD.
Mr. Evans?
I would agree with Mr. Ingram. I would like to see these body cams be purchased sooner rather than later. The question I have is, we have two forms in front of us here. We have a replacement watch guard video server, and then the body cams. Do they go together, or are they separate?
No, sir, there's two separate ones. The watch guard, that is an all-inclusive estimate or a quote, where it includes all the body cams and the server, the storage server for that particular unit. The Barcom one is, they're giving us a quote for the server portion of it. And if memory serves me correctly, like Mr. Jones said, it was a $3,000 difference or something.
Okay. But basically, we would be talking about them together to make sure you guys had everything you needed for the storage, for the upgrade, for the body cams.
That is correct.
Think about them together.
The advantage to, if we had a local IT like Barcom or whoever the company it is at the time is, that they're here faster if we had issues versus Barcom or a watch guard that's not in the area.
Okay.
So Chief, realistically, testing, setup, policy, maybe a month and a half, 2 months at the most.
And that's just an estimate.
I mean, having Barcom here help with the setup, testing, training, policy. I would think max of 2 months possibly, but
It's hard to say. I mean, this is a new, something that's unexplored on our end, so.
Okay.
I would like to say 60 days, I really would, but.
Have we communicated with some of the other smaller, like Balcones Heights, since they do have body cams? Have you communicated with them, Chief Zuniga, about maybe if you could communicate with them to get an idea of how long it took them to, implement the body cams once they were purchased and.
Absolutely. I talk with Chief Hanahara over there and get some ideas as to how fast they got the equipment up and rolling.
Anyone else?
Well, I think in the future, in addition to looking out for state funds, we should look for federal funds as well. They oftentimes have grants available, and that anytime we're looking for buy a piece of equipment, we should definitely look out for any other grants available on the federal level as well.
Yeah, and I just want
Response to that, though, is just keep in mind that some of those grants just have a delay, and in particular, these body cams is something we need now, not further down the road.
Well, we've been talking about body cams for years, and I kept getting pushback on this, that we didn't want them because, well, it's going to take a lot of time for someone to review it. If there was a case that the person that got a ticket or was arrested, that it was going to take hours and hours, are you going to need to hire someone else to review those records, or have you thought about that yet?
And that is something that I believe was presented before is a possibility. I mean, if depending on open records requests, as they start coming in, we have our records clerk that's trying to fulfill those now, other requests. And then you topple that on top, on the other responsibilities. It could require, having to have somebody else appointed to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Tovar?
Yes, I believe that this camera issue should be addressed now. Get these officers what they need. I mean, they're out there taking care of the citizens here. And they should have the best of everything to protect them. I believe it should be addressed now, that they should get these cameras, worry about how long it's going to take later. And this way the equipment is already coming. They're going to get it, get the training. You just said, Jim, that this police department is very professional.
Mm-hmm.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. And I mean, for them to keep that particular attitude of professionalism, they should have the best equipment.
I agree.
Personally, I'm a taxpayer here like you all are. And when it comes to this, I don't care how much you got to spend. These men should have what they need, and they will take care of us, the citizens. That's my view on this matter.
I agree, sir. Mr. Hurst?
Yeah, I agree with Frank, and I think we need to move forward as soon as we handle all our logistics and everything, because I would think from the time we place the order till the hardware and software is received is probably going to take longer than any implementation and training, I would think. And I would think, as far as like Frank said, giving the folks what they need, I can't imagine that there are too many municipal police departments that don't have body cameras anymore. You see stories about even these smaller municipalities. Castle Hills isn't that big, but we're not that small. And I think we've got to have it. It's like insurance. You've got to have it. I mean, even if you have to have another person or a half staff or something, one incident, not only can it cost you a horrible lawsuit, but you're talking about loss of life and everything. So I think we need to move forward with whatever we need to do. If we need to okay it, send it to the city council to okay the funds or whatever. I don't know about that, but we talked about this last September and August about that. And here it is 6 months later. So that's opinion.
May I say, Jim?
Chief, I'm sorry?
May I add something here?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Tovar.
You know, the chief was saying that it's going to take a considerable long time to get one of these grants that y'all are talking about. And if we make the investment, okay, it's done. And there's always the possibility that we'll get that money back down the line. Even like he says, if he applies for this, there's no guarantee that we're going to get it.
Mhm.
So you go into this with the attitude, hey, I'm getting this because we need it. And hopefully we'll be able to get this money back down the line.
Well, Mr. Tovar, I don't know about any grants that are retroactive, but I understand the urgency. I mean, I honestly do. And I'm not putting officers' lives above, the dollar.
Makes two of us.
I'm not. I mean, I'm truly not. Let me ask you a question, Chief. Now, I think what we were looking at or talking about is that I believe we need to go with an in-house server. From what I've been reading, I think it's more secure. I think everybody has, if it's up in the cloud, to get hacked and everything else. And I think defense attorneys would have just something less to gripe about. No offense to any attorneys in here. But so are in-house servers in both of these documents, one by Motorola and the other one by Barcom?
Yes, sir. Those are in-house servers. It's not iCloud or cloud storage. I believe that was also mentioned previously where I think the district attorney's office had also stopped taking cases, or it had been challenged in the past as to video that was being
In the cloud?
In cloud.
Okay. So, just forgive me, this Barcom is only for a server, is that correct?
That is correct. The server and its peripherals or whatever that's associated to the storage of video.
And am I reading it correctly that it's $25,547
Yes, sir.
for the server?
Yes, sir.
And could you look at the document for the Motorola and tell me, and maybe you can help me out, is there expended? Oh, their server is 23.
Yes, sir. It's, I believe, page 5, maybe.
116 terabytes versus,
And I spoke to Barcom as far as them, their breakdown, their estimate or the quote that they provided you is not quite as broken down as, but it is included. One of the questions I had is the redactive software. They said, yeah, it is included. It would just be pages and pages of breaking down all the line items for everything.
okay, here we go, here's a server. Chief, what's your suggestion?
I guess like I said earlier, I think we need to push forward with the purchase of the body cams.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that because
Okay.
What's your suggestion between the two? Could we, either Barcom server or the Motorola server?
Like I said a little while ago, I think that Barcom would be better served. I know they're probably a little higher, but if we call them, hey, something's malfunctioning, they're here, versus WatchGuard, what they're going to do is going to try to do a remote in and then try to, troubleshoot the problem. And then if they can't, then maybe they'll try to get a tech to come down here if they don't have somebody that's contracted here locally.
Okay. Also, the 12 body cameras that are listed for purchase, are those only patrol?
No, sir. So there's, some of those are for patrol. One is we want to delegate them for the warrant officer. We'd like to have a couple of them in spare if in the event something goes down that a detective is going to respond, or one of us, we can run down there and grab a body cam. We're not proposing that we buy one for everybody. That's a waste. We're looking at just having a bank and having them there and they just rotate them out through the shifts. It just, instead of each one being assigned a camera that's only being used for their shift.
Will there be time to download?
Yes, sir. That's
Between the
why we
shifts?
would have a couple of extra of the body cams that are already synced up and ready to go. So at the time that there's a shift change, they make sure that they're not taking one that, but it's also my understanding that the body cams, if we are automatically sync up to the dash cams.
Okay.
So they're almost simultaneously working to it. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what I understood, that they are automatically storing.
Okay. Uh, oh, phew, almost. Do your officers work part-time jobs?
There's on occasion that they work some side jobs, like they'll do football games, Aggie Park. Some of them have some others, security jobs like at churches and so forth.
You know, Chief, and I know the last item on but I'm going to suggest that we get one for every officer, and let me explain why. Is that if they're off, they could be working a bank or a game or whatever. If something goes down, if not, all hell's breaking loose, and they remember to turn it on, and they're not on duty here, but they're on duty like at a game or whatever, I think I'd rather have that officer covered that way. And
Yes, sir, that's understandable. I mean, I'd agree with that 100%.
you know, and then we would still have an extra couple in case one goes down. You know, you can replace it. And if I'm not mistaken, these 300s, they got replaceable batteries, so we need to make sure that we buy some extra batteries. So I know, Mr. Hurst, I know we don't want to put this off any longer. And I'll leave it up to everybody else as far as if we should get another quote, you know, so that every officer has one. And I don't know if our department's going to get that much bigger per se, and when we can make extra expenditures for extra cameras as time goes on.
Yes, sir.
But I guess you know, if these officers are doing things, you know, part-time and everything else, then I think we need to make sure that they're covered, because it could come back on us as far as any kind of lawsuits and everything else. And I think that would be another safeguard for our officers.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Hurst, let me ask you, would it be acceptable to you that we ask him to go back and get another quote to get more cameras for each of our officers, and then come back and get,
Oh, I think, well, first of all, I think you could, like the body cameras wouldn't be that, they're an expenditure, and all you got to do is add 5 more or 6 more or 7 more. I mean, it's not going to be that, for our purposes, it's not going to be like double the quote or anything like that. So, and I think that's a great idea. I would like to see one for everybody so that you have extra coverage, because if you're going to spend this much money, the little camera is like whatever. And if you don't have the camera, you might as well not have anything. So I think we can do a pretty good estimate on how many's on this quote, and then just double the cost of the cameras or whatever. But or we could just say that we approve this type of expenditure, and then let the chief decide exactly on who they're going to go with, because I would think they're the experts, and if they know about service support and training and things like that. So we could just give a preliminary okay to this financial part of it, and then they can come back to us and tell them which one to choose, and if we have to give them a formal okay or whatever, I don't know.
okay.
Does there be a specific motion to approve the amount, since it's
Yes.
so I think we would need to probably, have a specific amount. And so we would need to know which company we're going with.
Well, what I was going to make a motion, Mr. Ingram, was that we go with what was listed here with the Barcom server, and then what was listed on the Motorola minus their server, and whatever number that is. And then at least to get the ball rolling, that we amend the budget to include the expenditure for the Barcom for this Barcom server for $25,547. And then whatever the amount is, I guess the Motorola, which is 65,290 minus the 23,035. And so that's the motion I'm making, that I move that we amend the current CCPD budget for the purchase of body cams and to buy the server from Barcom for 547. And the Motorola package for whatever is 65 minus 23. Tell you what, let's just do this. Why don't we just go be a total of 50,000 plus 26,000. So we'll have a little extra.
That's to include the extra cams for that are not quoted yet.
Well, we can do that later. No, I tell you what.
Well, it looks like the cameras are about, what, $1,000
Yes.
each, just roughly. So you can just add another, however many cameras you need, 5 more cameras or.
Well, we'd be looking at probably another 12, and
Mhm.
that would, to add, have some extra, standbys.
Okay.
That's 120,000. The 12 times 1,000. That's 12,000.
How many officers do we have?
Now you know why I'm not an accountant. So that's 12,000. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. Yeah. All right.
77,000 for Motorola and 25,000 for Barcom.
Well, we'd be taking out the server, I believe, on page 3.
Sir, I think Mr. Schnall has some input because eventually this would have to go to council since they approved the budget as well. Mr. Schnall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I am the city attorney. Any budget amendment has to be approved by the city council. And our agenda tonight talks about action regarding the body worn cameras. I think a motion to authorize the purchase of the body worn cameras and the associated software and hardware is appropriate and permitted under this agenda item. But I think the action to amend the budget is better done at the next meeting of this board, so that it can be done with proper notice to the public that the board is suggesting and proposing an amendment to its budget. And that would go to the next city council meeting after y'all approve your budget amendment. It would go to city council for its approval. And I do think this process would be more consistent with the Open Meetings Act. I think that the Mr. Hurst's motion, as it ever evolves to a final wording, to move forward on the acquisition and purchase of the body worn cameras is appropriate, but that the budget amendment should be done at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schnall. I appreciate that. So can we make an emotion that we will, Mr. Schnall, make a motion that we will purchase these cameras and that at the next meeting, we'll have an actual dollar figure, or does that need to be done at all anyway?
I think including the estimated dollar figure is appropriate so that the record is clear what the board is approving. Some cities and some boards of this kind do provide for a little bit of extra dollars. An amount not to exceed X would be a way to do that. That gives the chief some flexibility. I don't know how recent these quotes are or how long these quotes are available. And I don't think y'all want to delay this if it turns out one of these quotes is $500 more than you approve. So I would just do exactly the exercise that you were doing. The Motorola bid minus the cost of the server plus the Barcom server cost And then maybe add a few dollars extra in case there are some extra charges that weren't included. That way you assure yourselves of getting the cameras as quickly as possible.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that, sir. Well, how about if I make a motion? Mr. Ingram, did you make a motion?
I have not made a motion yet.
Okay, okay. Well then, if it's okay, let me make a motion that we, just what Mr. Schnall said, we buy the server from Barcom and a camera, and the cameras from Motorola. And that'll include the extra cameras for all the officers. Not to exceed, is $80,000 sound good? Does that sound about right as far as adding another 12,000?
If that's in the roundabout figure, yes, sir. I'd have to go back and add and subtract the server and so forth. But I think you kind of did that. So that neighborhood, yes, sir.
Okay. So not to exceed $80,000. Do I have a second?
Well, like I said, you might want to bump it up a little bit.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's not gonna, we're not gonna pay that much for that.
Okay.
Maybe it's 85,000.
Okay. Then I'll amend the motion that we, like I said before, go with the Barcom server and the Motorola camera package minus their server, not to exceed $85,000. And Mr. Hurst seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. No opposition, it's unanimous. Thank goodness, huh?
Thank you. Thank you very
Man.
much.
Well, will you do me a favor and let the troops know that, you know, we're doing our best and we're trying to get these done for these guys and girls?
Absolutely. I speak on their behalf. They're going to appreciate it really well.
Well, don't get me wrong, it's definitely a worthwhile expenditure, there's no doubt. I mean, that's, you know, but anyway, we're on the way.
Ryan, will that be presented to the city council next time, or is there anything we have to do, or is that automatically on their agenda? or-
No, I actually have a memo from Chief Zuniga that I will be providing to city council on this matter. I do have monthly reports to city council, and if that is the process, we'll probably have it on the March agenda for their approval as well.
Chief, how many's in the department?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How many officers are in the department?
So right now we have, we're at 19, I believe, 20.
Aren't we down a few?
Yes, sir. We're down, obviously the chief's position and 2 other slots. Yesterday, in fact, I did offer a position to a new officer that is coming in from Dallas. He's passed everything, so we'll be down still 2 positions. That's including the chief's position.
All right, thank you.
Next on the agenda, and this was an agenda item that Mr. Evans wanted to address, is discussion and possible action regarding increasing meeting dates, including setting date for next meeting. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. You know, as a new member of the board here, I feel like we're all trying to get up to speed and we're trying to get in line here. And so like Mr. Jones has said about grant funding and some of these different things, the body cameras, I would propose we meet next month to make sure that we check whatever we need to check for city council to make sure that when they approve the body cameras, that we can do whatever we need to do to make sure that the body cameras get purchased. And then also to kind of get on top of some of these other questions that we have here too. So it seems like we met, I think, twice only last year. And it seems like there's a large gap between when we talk about things and we're trying to remember when they were and what we were talking about. So I'd propose we meet again in March. And then in March, we can decide when our next meeting should be after that.
Pretty good.
Any discussion?
Did you want that before or after the council meeting?
What would be recommended there? That's a good question.
After.
I would recommend going after. The week before the council meeting, we actually have zoning one night, ARC the next night.
Okay.
So The room is in use. So I would say after the council meeting.
Okay.
By then you know if they approved or not, and then by then Chief Zuniga will have the specifics on it.
Okay.
I believe the 9th is the council meeting.
Okay.
So are we going to actually schedule the next meeting right now?
I believe so, if
Oh.
that's, then
Yeah,
we can
let's
make a
do that.
motion if we can come up with a date for everybody. It's got to be after the 9th, preferably. But does, the 16th?
What day is that?
It's a Tuesday, sir?
Tuesday or Wednesday's fine.
Mr. Ingram, do you have a problem with March 16th?
Unfortunately, I have another meeting that evening,
Okay.
so I wouldn't be able to do the 16th. I'm open the rest of the week.
Okay. Perfect. How about the next day, Mr. Ingram?
The
Anybody have a
17th.
problem with 17th?
I'm fine with the 17th.
Is that spring break for?
So
We don't
just
care.
to let you know, that particular week, I'm gone.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Lieutenant can be here.
No. Yeah, how about the 24th? Well, tell me about the 24th. Is that good for you guys?
Yes.
Mr. Ingram?
The 24th. I can do the 24th.
I got something to do on the 24th.
And I don't
The other
typically
day will
attend
be fine.
CCPD meetings, but that's spring break and I'm gonna
Yeah,
spend
no,
time with my
you're
daughter,
right.
so.
Some of us don't have kids and,
March 24th is spring break for you? Oh, the break this
Okay.
week. Okay.
Okay, how about the 24th, guys?
26th, 16th, or what was it?
24th, it's a Wednesday?
Yeah, I think I'll see about changing what I gotta do.
Okay.
Is this at 6 p.m.?
Yeah, do you have anything on the 24th?
No, the 24th is fine, but at what time?
Mr. Evans, would you like to make a motion?
I propose,
Oh, and the time, at 6 p.m.
I propose we meet on March 24th at 6 p.m.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now, I know it's not on the agenda, but does anybody have anything as far as announcements? Because we didn't get a chance to put it on there, but anything anybody wants to discuss? I know I've hogged the mic and you're tired of listening to me, so.
Yeah, I
And
just,
and Mr. Jones, and Mr. James, I'm afraid that that's not permissible.
Can't even do it?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right,
Only
Mr.
the city
Small.
council can have announcements of community interest under the Open Meetings Act. But I would suggest if you do want to have that kind of a open comment session, that we need to be careful how we word it and have it on the agenda.
No, okay, I got you.
Let's just not try and skirt the Open Meetings Act.
I was just trying to be nice.
I
All right,
know.
Mr. Schnall, thank you very much, sir. I move that we adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second? Mr. Hurst, all those in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. Adjourn.